Hi, my name is Ben. I'm the family IT guy. I'm here to help you keep your kids safe on the internet. This video is an interview with Laura, a mom who has decided to share the story of her family's experience after her 14-year-old son became a victim of sextortion. His predator was a youth pastor that used Snapchat to hunt for and traumatize his victims by blackmailing them into performing sexual acts on camera. He has been caught and sentenced to 25 years in prison. Laura's objective in sharing this story is to help other families avoid a similar situation.
Once they said this name, my son was like, oh, he thought it was two people. He thought it was this girl, this 15-year-old girl, but he also thought it was a friend of this girl that had morphed themselves. So it was literally three people, but one. So he was
Oh,
himself. He was
whoa.
this girl, and he was a 19-year-old boy who was not sure if they were gay. So that's why the
Oh.
boy thing came into play, because this boy was trying to see and determine if he liked what he saw, if that's what really got him going. So
Whoa.
I guess, it was one of these, oh, hi, I'm Julie, but my friend's name is Mark, so it was kind of like an introductory type lineage for this person. You know, they started out as this main character, and then it just kind of continued to morph.
So first of all, give us a bit of a background on whatever you're comfortable
Okay.
with on your family. And so
Okay.
prior to 5 years ago, what was your family structure? How many
Okay.
kids? What's your routine? What is normal, what's daily life look
So for
like back
me,
then?
it's family of four: mom, dad, brother, sister. My daughter is 4 years, a little over 4 years younger than my son. So, you know, typical house, cars, job, Monday through Friday, kids play sports on the weekends. It was your normal family, birthday parties on the weekends, whatever had to be done. Um,
And you and your husband both working and stuff
yes, both of us full time.
yeah.
I unfortunately was never able to stay home with them, but um, COVID happened, right? So, normal family
Oh, right.
dynamic.
This was peak
Oh,
COVID
yeah.
time.
So COVID was March of 2020. I walked out of my job at a huge pharmaceutical company, um, and I didn't go back for 21 months. So I was home,
Whoa.
and a couple of days later, the kids were home. So here we are in COVID, don't
Yeah.
know what's going on. I'm still working. Kids are still schooling. Everything's still going the way life does right, in this moment, because nobody knows what ends up. So this goes on.
And
So
were the kids for the schooling were they now did they already have laptops from school, or did that become a new
so
thing, or what was
if
that like?
I remember correctly, they did not have laptops prior to this.
Okay.
Um I think,
So
well,
you're all home
my
now.
son I think did.
That
My daughter did not. That's what it was. He did, she did not. So we had to get her laptop established. And during all of this, she's struggling because she's not really sure of how the computer situation works, let alone having an email in fourth grade. She's like, I don't know what because she didn't have that responsibility before. So she's
Oh
struggling.
wow, she had to get an email
Yeah. And so
account.
there was that. And then she's trying to learn virtually, the structure of just an agenda, a daily agenda, and then doing all of the things. It was a nightmare. He, on the other
Yeah.
hand, ADHD to the max, already struggle busing. And then you throw this on top of
Mm,
it. Okay. So I'm like, holy God and
yeah.
baby Jesus, what are we going to like? I never
Yeah.
stopped, So then I went from like, I'm there full time, which is like a culture shock in a big way, because it's been years since I've never really been with my kids full time. My son was 9 weeks when he had to go to daycare. She was, a little older, but still, I didn't get a lot of time, So anyway,
Well,
so
and you're all working
right,
together at the
it's
same
like
time, all under the same
right. So
roof.
I'm like, okay, mom, worker, lunch lady, because then I'm like making breakfast, I'm doing lunches, and I'm dinner, and then I'm the only one doing the
Yeah.
shopping because, like, that's just how it was. So, and at that time, you had to wait outside in the lines to get into the store. So there I was, in the pouring rain or whatever the weather decided to do at that moment.
Right.
So it
Yeah.
was hard, and come to find out, my daughter was struggling with auditory processing disorder. We didn't know it at that time. So she's
Oh,
undiagnosed
okay.
auditory processing disorder, COVID, all of these things. So I'm like moving parts. My brain is in a million directions. I
Wow.
think at that
And your son's in 8th grade at
he
that time?
was in eighth grade. Yes, he was in eighth grade.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, because he was the COVID graduation, eighth grade graduation year. So,
Right.
anyway, so I had all of these things already going on, and my husband was leaving for work. He was still working as normal, and he's kind of like a maintenance handyman kind of guy, like type of jobs. Construction type things. So he was physical, still seeing people, so he's getting to leave the house every day. I'm stuck at home with the kids, and I'm like,
Mm,
I'm going nuts at this point, because again,
yeah.
it's just such a huge shift in the entire world, let alone, our family, it was a lot. So I'd say so that's March. I'd say like starting in the summertime of that year, 2020, I started noticing things like behavioral with him. He was always like kind of a gamer kid, he enjoyed not crazy, every now and then he'd game Minecraft and stuff like that. I started to notice, that his pictures and drawings and just things that he had on his walls for months are gone, suddenly gone. And I'm like, ¿qué pasa?
Oh, okay, like
Yeah,
posters and like he
everything
took his
just
stuff down.
gone. And I'm like, and
Okay.
he gave me, some bogus random excuse. And I can't remember at this time what the excuse was, but I questioned it because it was just not the norm. So then, not long
Yeah.
after, I notice everything has to be dark. Everything's got to be, his lights always have to be off. He always wants his windows closed. And then blankets start appearing on his windows instead of the curtains. He wanted it to be solid dark in his room. Like,
Okay.
okay, here we go, another flag. But then again, it was another excuse that seemed valid, I guess, at the time for me to question it, but not overly question it.
Not like push on it
Correct.
too
Yeah.
hard. If you don't mind, like what were some of the reasons that he would give to try to get you to back off a bit or something?
He just would tell me he didn't like Marvel anymore, or his taste was changing, or it was just these little white lie-ish type excuses that he just was doing these things. And again, I wish I could remember exactly where he was going with these reasons, but from what I can
Yeah.
remember, that's the direction, that he was giving me.
Right. He's just saying like, hey, this is no big deal. This is just my new thing.
Right.
I just don't want the old stuff, so I just took it down.
100%.
Kind of like that type of a
Yes.
vibe.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So, I did notice too that he had kind of become a little bit more recluse. He was not going outside and playing as much with his friends. I could hear his language change a little bit when he was playing, on his little Xbox or whatever. Just the tone of his whole demeanor was changing, in a way
And so
like
let's talk about, if you don't mind, like, oh, go
he
ahead. Go
just
ahead.
seemed a little bit more agitated and just blunt, I guess. He just, matter of fact, he didn't want to talk about much of anything. It was just, here's my answer. That's it. Please don't question anymore,
And
kind of thing.
so prior to that, the conversations might be more full of context or more
Fruitful, yeah. I mean, he was
descriptive.
very much descriptive. He was more energetic with his, just his whole everything. Like his everything changed about him. And so it was the pictures, and then it was the blankets, and then it was the bathroom. He would be in the bathroom forever, every day at dinner time. And he'd be in the bathroom for an hour,
Oh.
2 hours, and I'm like,
Oh.
son, what could this be? What's going on? Is there something? Do we need to go to the doctor? Are you having issue? I'm thinking there's something that's not right and he's not feeling well and he's just not saying.
Yeah.
So again, it was every day,
Wow.
come down for dinner. Dinner's sitting on the table, ice cold, every single day.
And otherwise, you guys would normally eat together,
Mhm.
or just kind of in and
Always,
out kind of deal,
always ate
or
together. That's one thing that I've always,
oh,
tried to really keep as a family is family dinners. I think it's an important time to connect and everybody talk about their day and, what may be
yeah,
coming up with the family, if we have plans, work, whatever the case is, it's a good connection time. So that
right.
started to
Oh, wow. And
change.
so he's no longer. Not only is he no longer joining dinner, but he's also doing so in a way that's just a very different behavior, and he's in the bathroom most of the time.
Yes. So then it was getting argumentative, because I would get to a point where hey, your dinner's been sitting here for over an hour. What's going on? What is this? And, it was to the point where he was telling me that he was having stomach issues. So we were going to the doctor. He didn't
Oh,
have any issues, you know.
oh, okay.
So by November, December timeframe, we had booked a family trip to Disney. December. It was December. And we're in COVID still. So we get on the plane, we go to Disney. We had booked a, trip. So we followed through, masks and everything. And we actually had gone with some friends and their kids. So our kids and us, it was cool. It was fun. And it was my daughter's 10th
That's
birthday.
awesome.
So it was like all
Wow.
celebratory at that time. So we're standing in
Yeah.
line for a ride. I can't remember what ride. And my cell phone rings. And I'm like, okay, well, it's the area code from near the house. It's a number near our house. Let me answer it. So I answer it, and it's Sergeant blah, blah, blah from the county prosecutor's office in regard to your
Oh.
son. And I said, okay, well,
Whoa.
okay. Let me just step out of line here because I'm currently standing waiting to get on a ride. Let me let me just part ways. So I did. I stepped outside, and this detective was not really forthcoming with any information at that time. I said, can I please ask what this is in regard to? And he said, well, I can't tell you at this time because the person that this is in reference to has just been arrested, and we can't give any more details at this time. I'm like, whoa, arrested. Hold on here. Like, wait a minute. My son is here in Disney with me, and now you're telling me somebody's getting arrested. Please hold the phone, And he's like,
So you don't even know like who's in trouble or not in trouble
right.
yet.
Because he didn't even say.
Something's happened to
Right.
somebody.
So then he said,
Okay.
is this your son? Blah, blah, blah. Yes, this is my son.
Yeah.
I said, okay. Well, he's with me right now. Can I, again, ask what this is in regard to? Blank. I said, is this drugs? No. Is he in trouble? No. I forget what the other option was that I said. And I said, is this sex related? And he said, yes. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even know at that point what it could even be. So
yeah,
he said, I'll tell you what, it's 2 weeks before Christmas. My wife is having surgery. I'm off for the Christmas holiday. I'll call you back like January, the beginning of January. And I'm like, so you're going to leave me hanging for like 3 weeks. No clue at all as to what in the hell is going on. None at all.
My goodness.
So they come off the ride.
Wow.
They come off the ride.
Oh,
and
God.
At this moment, I'm like, I don't know how to feel right now. I don't know really what's going on. I said to my son, do you have something on your phone? Like, is there something on your phone? Have you done something? Have you been involved with someone? Like, where are we at here? You've got to talk to me at this point. And he's like, his eyes are at like quarters at this point because he's like, I don't know what this could be, But he said to me, I have a picture in my phone. And I'm like, a picture? He's like, I have a dick pic in my phone. And I said, son, you have to get rid of this. Like, whatever that may be, you have to get rid of it. He said, but I had to hold on to it in case I need to get back at this person. And I'm like, what? It didn't even register. So just keep this in mind for, future story, this statement, because again, I have zero clue at this point. So all I can tell him is that I pray to you and to God that I can help you with whatever this is. But right now I don't know, and I can only help you so much. So you have to be honest with me because this is like a punch in my face. Okay. So we finished the Disney trip. This whole time I'm like bugging out inside because I still don't know, what this is. So I want to say...
Yeah, how are you supposed to sleep until January?
Yeah, exactly. It was horrible. So January 13th, 2021, I had 2 detectives come to my house. One prosecutor. No, it was 1 prosecutor, 1 detective, excuse me. And the prosecutor, he said to me, I just want to preface this by saying there's going to be a lot of things that are asked today. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of details. There's a lot of gory parts that you probably don't want to hear. And I said, well, I'm not going to hear them. I'm not leaving my then 14-year-old son here with no parental support, So they interviewed him, and my husband and I had to go into a separate room. And he, they had to interview us first, ask us all these questions, get our permission to do the interview, blah, 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 blah. So they had everything, they had subpoenaed Snapchat because this was going on through Snapchat. This incident that I
Oh,
still
okay.
didn't know about until this moment when they're, interviewing him and me. Um, and then they're asking him about his friends through Snapchat and this and that. And come to find out, Julie Miller was a 15-year-old girl,
Ah,
AKA a 31-year-old youth pastor, um, that was, I guess, fishing through mutual friends. So I guess this person would friend request Amy and then go through Amy's list of friends, see who they, boy wise, who they could connect with them. And then it was just like an ongoing mutual thing. So this person would find whoever they decided was going to be their flavor of the day. And he would tell them, if you do not do A, B, C, XYZ, whatever the case is, I'm going to take your pictures, which he did. He would screenshot them. He would screen record them because he was watching them through cell phone and computer, like through Snapchat, I guess. He was doing all these things.
yeah. Yeah.
So these kids were terrified, you know? So that's how this morph, came into play because once they said this name, my son was like, oh, he thought it was two people. He thought it was this girl, this 15-year-old girl, but he also thought it was a friend of this girl that had morphed themselves. So it was literally three people, but one. So he was
Oh,
himself. He was
whoa.
this girl, and he was a 19-year-old boy who was not sure if they were gay. So that's why the
Wow.
boy thing came into play, because this boy was trying to see and determine if he liked what he saw, if that's what really got him going. So
Whoa.
I guess, it was one of these, oh, hi, I'm Julie, but my friend's name is Mark, so it was kind of like an introductory type lineage for this person. They started out as this main character, and then it just kind of continued to morph. So I think
Wow.
some of the parents had caught on to something going on with this person with their children. So they reported something going on. So this person was deleting and reinstalling the app as the person, Julie 1.Miller at blah, blah, blah. Next time they get caught, Julie Miller 2. Like it was all different variations.
Oh, in order to reconnect with the
Yeah.
same kids that they were already talking to.
Mm-hmm.
So like okay, so does that mean that the parents or the kids would like block
Yep.
the first
Yep.
one to say, "Oh, don't talk to them anymore." We block their
Yeah.
account. So then the youth
Yes.
pastor guy that was posing as
The
a
girl.
15-year-old
Mm-hmm.
girl would create another Julie
Yes.
Miller dot
Yep.
one, reconnect because that's not
Hey,
blocked, and then
Mark, it's
reestablish the
Julie.
conversation.
Don't you remember me? Kind of remember last week when we were talking, so it was kind of like, and, again, the teenage mind is like, oh yeah, they don't think anything outside of a circle, I mean, that's, oh yeah, I remember that
Yeah,
person. They think everybody's their friends. So
right.
That's how it started. That's how apparently this whole thing, and I have to be very honest, I still don't know the connection as to the reasons for the Alabama, Tennessee locations. I don't know the reasonings behind that. Um, excuse me. I can tell you.
Oh, because the perp was local to you
Yes.
guys, however, also simultaneously taking advantage of kids that were not local.
Yes.
Okay.
And because it was COVID and everybody was home, this was hours every day. His wife thought he was married with 3 children. His wife thought he was going to work every day, but he was 8+ hours torturing these kids all over the place. It was just a constant thing for him. So,
wow.
Come back to the bathroom story. One of his things was to hold these boys in the bathroom, make them, and I don't know what level of detail I should, I can tell you he made them jerk off in front of the camera, in front of their phone.
Yeah.
And again, he was taking videos, he was taking still pictures. It was a whole a whole thing. And his wife and 3 little girls were home while he's doing this.
Under the same roof. He's just in a different room.
Yeah. So, in all of this, another big part of going through that time frame, my husband and I separated during COVID, during that first, he moved out of our home for a little over a month, 2 months, prior to going to Disney. So there was a lot of stuff going on, during all of this. It was it was all of the things. So.
Oh, wow. So at the same time, but not necessarily related in terms of.
It was, but
the root
we didn't realize it at that time, that there was, a lot of the additive that was going on was what was going on, but wasn't the main cause.
Oh, no. Okay.
But so anyway, so January 13th is when we had the interview. I cannot remember how long. I think it was kind of because it was all so much at one time. We found out everything that was going on. I ended up having to take a leave of absence from work because I couldn't even function. I don't know how to explain it other than feelings. Everything was overwhelming me at the time. So I literally took trash bags and I just took my arms and anything that was on the counter, it didn't matter. Bills, cards, cash, stuff, anything healthcare cards, envelopes, everything, right in the garbage. I was taking stuff off of the walls in my house because everything was suffocating my brain because it was so much to think about in the situation that I was in. 2 kids, home, COVID. I'm home, COVID. Husband and I are separated. I just find out all of these things. It was I couldn't function.
I don't blame you. I'm not sure that I would be able to either. And how, with the way that this impacted you and the way that, of course, impacted your son, if you don't mind my asking, what was that like during that time when you felt so overwhelmed and suffocated in your own home? What was that like trying to communicate with or relate to, or what was it like for your son to communicate with you? How did that impact your relationship at the time?
I can tell you it felt like a living hell. Um, it was one of the hardest times of my life, and I was alone. Like, I don't have any family here. My family's in North Carolina. Um, my husband was completely emotionally MIA. Physically, he was there. Emotionally, and any other way I needed him, completely gone. I almost lost my job. I couldn't, I felt like my world had just completely fallen apart.
What feeling was underneath that? And I ask because I've had experiences in my life where people that I didn't know would do something that violated me or my space,
I
but nothing to this extent.
wanted,
What is that? What is that underlying feeling?
until the day I sentenced that person, I swore on everything I had, to the prosecutors, to the child advocacy team, to everyone. I swore I was going to jail that day because I swore I was going to kill that person for what he did, not only
Yeah.
to my son, but to me. That is one of the that's one of the most I can't even put it into a feeling. It's anger, it's hatred. I don't like to use that word. I don't preach it by any means, but that is nothing but that feeling. Um,
Yeah.
it was everything. It was lonely. It was like claustrophobic. Everything was just, even to put clothes on, it was claustrophobic because it was so much on such a heavy level. And here I am, and this is happening. And so it was a lot of blame for years until the day I sentenced that person. And I say that, and I referred to him as that in that courtroom when I was speaking, as a person. He's not a man. He doesn't,
Mm.
he has not earned that title in my life, nor will he ever.
Yeah.
And I said
Yeah.
that to him.
Yeah.
Because again, almost 3 years of trying to put feelings down for an impact statement. I couldn't do it until that morning because you can't put those feelings on a piece of paper. It's,
Yeah.
and until you ever have to be in that situation where you would literally kill someone for your child, I can't say that you would ever understand it. But I know as a parent,
Yeah.
you can probably come close to understanding what you would want to do to somebody.
Yeah. Certainly. I would imagine that I'd imagine I'd be right alongside you. If the same thing happened to me,
Yeah.
I'd be picturing myself, well, I'm going to prison.
Yeah, for sure.
That is the innate drive in us as being the ones responsible to protect our
That's right.
kids.
And I feel like I
And
felt like I failed them. I failed my son, and I'm right here. I'm supposed to be protecting them. And so it was a lot of guilt on my part, a lot of guilt. And I didn't know how to deal with it because, again, I didn't have anybody in my corner saying, hey, like, I'm here if it's like I got the invitation, the extended offers of, hey, if you need to talk, I'm here. But it was not like a genuine, I'm truly here to help you get through. It was just more what they could be known for doing, if that makes any sense. Like
yeah.
I had a family member who wanted to come, be the police officer that they, were at the time and speak. And they were going to, they were going to tell this person that, blah, blah, but they don't know any bit about how I'm truly feeling. It's just that entitled police officer position coming to authority,
Yeah.
nothing more.
Yeah.
So it was a lot. It was so much, Ben. I wonder how I got through it most of the time, because I really don't know. I can tell you Xanax I did take during that time because I couldn't
Yeah.
function otherwise,
Yeah.
and thankfully I, was able to just stop, once all of these things. But to get that initial
Oh,
through
yeah.
that, I really didn't have much of a choice, because I thought I was going to go to the
Yeah.
loony bin.
Well, yeah. I mean, you have to do what you got to do.
Right.
And I mean, I'll say my reaction to your statement of the guilt that you were feeling and the feeling an element of failure. So I'm coming into your story 5 years after it's happened. I'm meeting you for the first time now. You reached out to me in a proactive manner.
Yeah.
With a message that struck me as powerful and positive, that you want to have a positive impact to take your struggles
Absolutely.
and what you experienced and what your son experienced, and to use those things to deliver any element of a positive impact to other families.
Without fail. Absolutely. I mean,
And so I want to recognize that in you right now. And thank you for doing that. And that is a very powerful sign of a good mom, of a real mom. And speaking about men and women and persons that don't deserve those titles, like a strong woman, to put yourself out there right now and publicly speak about things that people don't often like to speak about. So I just want to recognize that. That's very powerful and that's very positive.
I appreciate that. And honestly, when I told you I came across your platform, and it resonated with me, because I didn't have anybody to go to. If I had someone that I knew I could reach out to, you, me, I would have given anything to just have some solid support, some solid advice, some solid, genuine interest and concern for me and my well-being too, and that's honestly, I have, since those court doors closed behind me that day, I walked out of that courtroom a completely different person, because I did something that day that I didn't think that I was going to be able to do when I spoke. Because I thought I was going to go to prison. But then I gave it to God, and I said, you have got to get me. I literally stood in front of that judge and I said, you've got to get me through this. Give me strength. And I'm telling you, that's the only thing that got me through. And I stood there, and it took me a minute to compose myself. But once I started to say what I wanted to say, and I knew at that moment that I was the only one saying it, and I was the only voice that he was going to resonate with for the rest of his forever, I'm okay with that. And walking out that door that day, knowing that I had said my piece, was priceless. And I want to be able to help others. I mean, that's literally my life goal. I want to be able to help others that are in this position, because it is horrible to feel this way. Horrible.
Well, and speaking of the courtroom thing, so how many families were impacted, and how many families were in the courtroom? Because you're the only one that spoke. Yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
So they never really gave an exact number of families, because every state, is going, I guess, if they want to press charges, they have that option. As of right now, Alabama is the only one, and Pennsylvania, to extradite him. He has not been extradited yet, but he will. He's also got federal charges coming as well. So I don't think he's going anywhere.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Yeah.
but as far as when I went into the courtroom that day, and of course, leading up to that, I didn't sleep for days. I cried, I couldn't eat. It was hard getting to that point. And it kept getting like we would get a date, for the sentencing and something would happen, so we'd get right up to the day or the day before and it would get canceled. So it was like months of this happening.
Wow.
And finally they were like, this is it. This is the date. Period. End of story. We're not changing it. Be there or be square, kind of, at that point. Okay, so we go. And I almost felt like I'm like in Hollywood because they had me go into this little room, and they're trying to tell me everything that's going on. Well, the entire courtroom at this point is filled with his church people. Everybody's filled in on my side, his side. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So my team, our team
Wow.
walks in and they're like, oh, no. You here, move over to this side, Okay. So I will tell you, and I still to this day don't know what was said, but after I said what I said, and I can pretty much sum it up for you. I have it written down somewhere, and because of the move, since all this with my husband and I don't remember where I put the paper, but it's somewhere. I have it all together because I wanted to read to you what I wrote, because I think it was a pretty impactful statement. And I told him, I said, though you may never have been in my house physically, you were there many times virtually. You took advantage not only of my son, but of my family. We've had to move because I just wasn't resting. That it was too many negative things that happened, and we moved. So my daughter had to change schools. My son had to change schools. I almost lost my job. I told you took a, temporary intermediate leave. And they were trying like hell to get me fired. It was everything at one time. And on top of it, my son had not come out as being gay at the time. So when we moved, he was talking about committing suicide. So it was all of this that happened. We moved. He talked about committing suicide. Then he came out as gay. And then we had to move again. And so it's just, it's been a lot. It's been a whole lot.
Well, speaking of recognizing positive things, I want to recognize that that he came to you with that.
Yes.
Especially after all this happened.
Yeah.
Right? Because the way that each of us as parents, at least this is my opinion, the way that we respond to our kids in times of crisis and the way that we process our own stresses and our own feelings and the way we reflect those back onto those around us, including our kids, of course, has an effect on future communications and future precedent. And so the fact that after all that, he still came to you in the most difficult times is amazing.
Huge, right?
And that's awesome.
And I'm really proud of that, to be honest, because I have a very, very tumultuous relationship with my mom. We always have. So I was 19 when I moved out, and so, I've kind of always had to be in my own corner, and so I always wanted to make sure that my kids wouldn't have to feel the way that I felt growing up, that I couldn't go to my mom for things or whatever that may be from people, but it's one of those things that I think this has been such a pivotal moment in our life that it has given me such a huge appreciation for my two children, because they're such amazing kids. They're wonderful humans. And despite all of this that's gone on, they kick ass. Like, I'm so proud of them.
Awesome.
And my son is
That's
finally,
great.
like going to counseling now. He's finally understanding things because for so long he was angry. He didn't want to talk about it. He still doesn't want to talk about it. And I'm okay with that. I don't bring it up. If he wants to talk about it, then he can come to me with it. Um, but he's always said it hurt me more than it hurt him. And I think in a lot of ways
Mm,
that's probably true, because again, as a parent, you just want to be this solid for them. And when something like this happens, you're like, holy shit, I feel like the biggest failure right
yeah.
now, you know? So there's a lot that goes into it, there's so much that goes into it. But the impact statement, yeah. So I told him, I basically what I said to you. It's affected my marriage. I've nearly lost my marriage. I've nearly lost my job. My son spoke of suicide. We've had to relocate, just all of the things that have happened. Um, and I felt so much closure. I felt like for 3 years, I carried so much mental luggage. It didn't matter if I moved into 10 brand new houses because I'm still carrying the same mental luggage until I was able to
Yeah.
unpack that day and know that he is going away for 25 years. See ya. It I was able to unpack my luggage. And from that day forward, I'm telling you, it was like, okay, I can do anything. I feel like I can do anything. I feel like I can it's made me a different person. I feel a
Yeah.
lot stronger. I set boundaries, like it's changed
Mhm.
everything. Everything.
Fantastic. That's
So,
wonderful. It's really beautiful.
I think it has absolutely had some really, really, really terrible parts and some really horrible feelings, and didn't think there was a light at the end of the tunnel, but I feel like we're at that light now. I know he's away. I know my son is getting the help that he finally needs. I know that my husband and I are working on things. We're not carrying any of that mental luggage. We're starting fresh. It's literally this has changed everything from the ground up. And that's the truth. That is 150% the truth.
And what have you been able to learn from your son what for example, if he could have recognized something or seen something while it was
Mhm.
happening or before it happened, like was there anything that he's taken from this or that he's learned from this of like, okay, if I could go back and change one thing that would have put this in a different path? Like, has there been any
Yeah,
talk
I
of that
mean,
kind of
I
stuff?
talked to him. Sorry, my allergies are so bad. My eyes are itching like crazy. I talk to
No.
him all the time. I mean, since he was little, I've always been a talker, if you couldn't tell. And I've always just done that with my kids, it's such a good connection point and it's just my time with them, like I like to go into their beds and snuggle with them and just BS, and we'll just talk about everything. Um,
Yeah.
so I think through the conversations and through time, he would say communication because I don't think at that point he understood the dynamic that I play in his life. Like at 14, your brain is going in so many directions, and then to have this thrown at you on top of it, I I know he wanted to tell me. I just don't think he knew how to tell me really at that time without really
Yeah.
upsetting me because I would have been like, what are you talking about? Who is this person? Let me find them." Like it just would have kind of initially, spiraled into something like that. But I didn't have that. It
Yeah.
already spiraled before I could do all that. So and he
Yeah.
was already in jail, so I didn't have to worry about all that. Um,
Yeah.
but I find it ironic that he tried to say this all happened because if you look at the one document I sent you, it's actually a car accident. He was in a really bad car accident, and he tried to say that that's what made him do all these things. And I said, car accidents do not make you
Oh,
like little boys' penises. I'm so sorry, but that's not how it happens. And
not the typical outcome of a car
right,
accident. Yeah.
but that's the story they were trying to stick to, and I'm like,
Wow. God, talk about a
oh yeah,
stretch. Jesus.
oh yeah. And then
Whoa.
when I literally
I mean,
tell you,
they're not even trying at that point.
this guy, his attorney, was like a pimp almost. If I were to give you his name and you'd look, he's
Ooh,
like on Google, with all these girls in bikinis, and I'm like, okay,
yeah.
so he had to
Wow.
make a huge deal out of, this guy's character witnesses in the courtroom this specific day, and the judge is literally looking at him like, you've got to be kidding me. But he introduced
Wow.
everyone that came in that
Wow.
day, to support this person. And they all came up to me. I don't know what they were trying to say after the court, had adjourned, because everybody was behind me telling them to leave me alone, and they escorted me out. But they obviously resonated with something that I said because
Yeah.
they all were trying to come up to me. So, you know, um, it's been a wild ride. Like I said, it's been heavy. It's been real heavy, but I feel like at this point I'm able to breathe again, and it feels really good.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that you've been able to have a process to come out the other
Right.
side in some
Right.
respect. Uh, and do you feel that is, and like you said, maybe it's just too early to tell, and your son is just
Mhm.
starting to, talk to a
Right.
therapist and stuff. Like, do you see that for him? Do you see that's happened in
Yes.
any way? Is he still kind of in the depths of it? Like,
I feel as I'm watching him, and I've always been pretty hyper vigilant with him because of the ADHD that we've experienced, and he had a lot of sensory issues when he was young. So I've when I tell you from the jump, he's had me in it since the beginning. I've just continued to go with it. Um, you know, I think it's a lot of it's his maturity. His maturity has changed a lot of things, I feel like, and I think he's really getting it a little bit more now.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I could see that being it. I mean, at these ages, and I think it's awful to even form the thought in my mind, but I seems to be that the people that do this kind of stuff, one of the reasons they're doing it is because the young people that they're affecting are young,
Mhm.
and that they're not
Right.
mature enough, and that they're not experienced
Correct.
enough to process these things, and so they can trap
Right. Yes,
kids
very
in
easily.
these terrible ways.
Very, very easily. And that's one of the things that they were talking to me about, because I became very, very, very close with the child advocacy team members. And I mean, if it wasn't for the support of these two women, and one of them stood next to me that day in court, because I I didn't physically know if I was going to be able to stand there, but
Yeah,
they were so strong for me. And I think that I got confidence even more so because of that. I knew that they were there. Um, but it doesn't always turn out like this, sadly. It doesn't
yeah,
turn out
yeah,
positives a lot of times. But
yeah.
in my case, thankfully, I'm so glad that I'm on this side and able to tell my story and able to help others. And, I feel like this may be my calling, I don't know, but it's huge to me that I've been able to have this interview with you and get this out there and to tell other parents. And, it's okay. It doesn't make you a bad parent. It doesn't change anything about that. These things happen,
Yeah.
What I've learned is to just be more vigilant. I think the downside to this whole thing for me is that I probably think the worst of everything at this point with a lot of things. Not the worst, but I'm always like, you got to be careful, just be aware, it's just always be aware of your surroundings and what's going on because, like I tell him, the world is not a nice place. And especially his statistics. He's a young white gay boy that has gone through this huge thing, like, so he's already got the odds against him, and that, I don't want more stacked against him, if that makes any sense. Because,
Yeah, for sure.
the part that I think I'm struggling with him the most now, and he's almost 19, is that he thinks he's invincible. Mom, I'm fine. Mom, nothing's gonna happen. Mom, and I'm like, oh, I'm like, don't say that, but that's, I think, my downfall, that that I'm like, at this point. But I still let them do their things. It's just, I feel like I'm always in survival, mode.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, well, can't blame you. It's very difficult. I mean, these, especially when something does actually
right.
happen, if it's hard enough not to be concerned as a parent when like nothing happens,
Yeah, I know.
or they just fall down
Right.
outside and
Of
get hurt or something,
course.
like nothing, um, and have you guys found, okay, so communication, right? And
Mhm.
his ability to communicate would be the thing. Like, okay, if you could go back in time and change a
Right.
thing, if he could find the way, the capability, the method, the timing
Mhm.
with which to have told you. Um, so there's, because I always think about these things with my work doing the family IT guy
Right.
stuff. I'm always looking at, okay, there's that side, there's the relationship
Mhm.
side, that's the
Yep,
communication and the trust and all
for
the
sure.
things. And obviously you guys have like some wonderful
Yeah.
trust, based on what you've said is that you've been
Mhm.
through. And then there's like the technical side of like the the tools, the internet, the phones,
Mhm.
the apps, the things. Like, how have you guys changed anything there? Like, is there anything, like, if I think about, for other parents that are listening, other kids that are listening, in addition to trying to further their communication, which is truly, I mean, very
Mhm.
challenging
It
thing to do,
is.
because that's a parenting style, that's a personal thing that everybody has their own way of going
Right.
about. Do you have any commentary or any thoughts on like the technical side of like before and after,
So,
or lessons learned?
as far as me, I did not realize the depth of Snapchat. Um, you know, it's one of those platforms because it goes away so fast. Once you open it, it goes away. So that, I think, was not necessarily eye opening for me, because obviously I have Snapchat, but I just use it for the filters. It's not like I know it. I don't know anything about it really, but
Yeah, yeah,
I think if anything, I just would have probably maybe checked his phone a little bit more. But again, it's like, again, like we said in the beginning, I can check it every day, but there's still going to be stuff, these kids, if they're going to do it, they're
yeah,
going to do it. Right. So it's like, how much can I, like, I can put parental controls on, I can do all those things, but I don't know. I mean, yes, I've learned obviously a whole lot of lessons, but The only thing that I've done is I go through and I make sure that they know everybody that's in their friends list. That's what I do with her at this point.
Okay.
My son's,
Yeah. Yeah.
he's older, so I can't really, you know, let me have your phone. You're going to be
Yeah.
19, let me just check your space here,
Yeah.
so it's hard. I definitely checked his, again, I checked to see if he knew all of his contacts in Snapchat, but they have Instagram, they've got Facebook, they've got TikTok. I don't know what else is out there, with these things. I am so
Yeah.
stupid with that stuff. Um, but
Well,
not
that's the real
stupid.
challenge here. I mean,
I am, but I'm
yeah.
not.
Right. No, yeah. 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 Well, I mean, I feel like, up until 10, 15 years
Mhm.
ago, the fundamentals of parenting have probably been like close to the same
Yeah.
forever. And now all of a sudden there's like a new category that you have to know about
I
somehow. Like the
completely.
parents have to know computer
Yeah.
science, like you have to go get an
I
IT
know.
degree,
It's true. It's so
Um,
true.
and that's kind of like the short version of why I do what I
Right.
do is to try to say like, hey, like there's a million things to know, but if you're going to focus on one or two or three,
Right.
like these are the ones at the top of the
Yeah.
list kind of thing. And that's why these conversations are really
Yeah.
great, because a lot of the things at the top of the list are actually like non-technical,
Okay.
and it's the family
Right.
dynamic, and it's the trust. It's the, how do we use our
Mhm.
stuff? How do we interact with our
Yeah.
phones and our internet
That's
connection?
100%.
What examples do
Yeah.
we set? And then finally, but still including like, then what do we do with the kids'
Mhm.
tech? What do we not do?
Right.
What do we do? And how do you establish boundaries and
Yeah.
agreements and technical limitations and all this kind of stuff? And so for your daughter, who's younger,
Yep.
so is she
She's
now beginning
14.
at high school-ish
She's gonna be a
age?
freshman.
Uh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yep.
So has has she taken away anything from this stuff? Has she been able to learn
That's a really
from
good
this for
question,
herself?
because I will say I have taken away the fact that she and I have become closer because of all of these things. She has seen
Oh, okay.
how hurt, and she has seen all of the raw emotions, and she's been there through everything with me. Like, she's consoled me. I know that probably doesn't sound healthy, from a psychological standpoint, that she's consoling me, but it is, like, she knows that
Way it
I'm
goes.
I'm
Yeah.
hurt, and
Yeah.
I'm just trying to protect them, at the end of the day. So I think she's definitely cautious at this point. She's very cautious. And she's the first one to come to me and say, like, Mom, this doesn't seem right, or this doesn't sound right with this person. Should I block them? Yep, you're good, and even
Oh,
friends.
that's amazing.
Yeah, even friends that she's blocked because of their behaviors and the things that they're doing.
Oh,
So
beautiful. Honestly, like that's the real, I feel like that's the most real closest answer, if there is one,
it's solid.
of like, if a kid had a scenario in which they could properly be
Mhm.
skeptical and respond and say, this right
Yeah.
here seems
Mhm.
sketchy. They're asking me for something, or they're talking to me in a way that violates a boundary or that raises a red
For
flag.
sure.
Let me go get help.
Yep.
Like that is
Yes.
amazing. Like if that's the dream state for me, for like every kid on the
Mhm.
planet, if we could somehow drop into every kid's
Right.
brain, like, here's the boundaries, here's the things to look for. If this thing goes on, raise
Yeah.
your hand.
Yeah,
you
and that's
know?
the thing, and that's what I try to really encourage, and I have praised it, I preach it, I do it. My mantra is literally this: everything happens for a reason. Um, what goes around does eventually come around. Um, be kind, and don't be afraid to voice yourself and to set boundaries, because if you don't, people will walk all over you. And I think she has also seen the progression of how I've had to handle relationships, because throughout all of this as well, for me, I've lost friendships because of, the way they weren't there for me, or the things that maybe they said to me, about my son, or whatever the case may be, that I've just
Yeah.
closed that part. And, it's furthered my journey along. And I just think, because for the most part, it's the four of us, right? So, like, my husband's family is extremely low effort, very low effort, and they live close. So they don't really put much effort into seeing my kids ever. And my family lives 500 miles away. So they don't really get to see my parents unless, video calls. So it literally is just the four of us most of the time. So I think my kids have a genuine appreciation, and they have true, genuine feelings as far as love and concern and everything like that, because actions speak louder than words any day of the week, no matter what.
I sure do.
You can say you
Yeah.
love, you can say all the things, but until you show me and you do prove to me, that's when the game changes. The equation's always gonna,
Yeah.
1 + 1 always equals 2. My kids will tell you all these things because I say them all the time. 1 + 1 always equals 2. Unless you want that equation, you want a different answer, you got to change that equation, because you're always going to get 2. So
Yeah.
you got to change
Yeah.
it.
Well, and that's a good sort of analogy to this whole topic, because like, if you want an outcome, if you're currently achieving a certain outcome and you want the outcome to change, you need to change the inputs.
100%.
And that's the hardest part for stuff is everybody. It's a human thing. Change is hard.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so that's why I like to have this conversation, is like, so that if people see the things that you saw, where, hey, there's like big behavior changes. And that's the part too that I struggle with a lot, of trying to put myself in the shoes of like, okay, so my kid has a behavior change, but it could be because he's a kid,
Right.
so it's like,
It's a battle.
like, looking back on that, like, if you could go and repeat that thing of like, oh, the posters are
Yeah.
coming off the wall,
Yeah.
the blankets. I mean, I'd have to imagine that there'd be no way to take the guess of like, oh, maybe it's this,
No.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, when
what do you think
I'm
about that?
literally
Would you
going
agree
through
with that?
this, I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you? What is going on? Like, are your friends, and of course I'm like, are your friends doing something? Like, what, why?
Yeah.
And he, like I said, it was just, he's a 14-year-old brain. So, I mean, it was like silly things, so-and-so said that, but meanwhile, what I didn't even tell you, the cause behind all of that was because this person, through the video on Snapchat, could see the artwork in his room on his walls. So when they were on the Snapchat video thing, this person was commenting on, oh, your artwork is so good. You draw, all these things. And my son is like, no. So whatever commentary this person was making freaked him out. And that's why.
Yeah.
So then that's why the room was dark, because he didn't want him to see anything on the walls. He didn't want him to know anything. And I guess another part that I forgot to tell you was I was really sick, like during November time frame, and I had been having some iron infusions. And my son was, I want to go to the gym. I want to go to the gym. I want, and it's cold. It was dark early. It was wintry. I'm so sluggish. I could barely move. And I would bring him to the gym because I'm thinking he wants to go and get healthy. No, he wanted to go because this person was telling him that he was coming to my house to pick him up. And my son was scared. So he thought of a public place.
Oh.
And the gym was where I could get him to. So then,
wow,
not long ago, a couple of months ago, my son asked me to go to the gym with him. And I cried my whole way home because I didn't realize I hadn't been back to the gym since in that time. And it was with him, it was all of the thing. It flooded me, and it was only a couple of months ago, um, but
Yeah.
it's a trigger for me, it's like, I try not to think about it, because I'm trying to think of the positive that has come out of it, but those things still sit with me. They'll always sit with
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. I really hope that your son finds some value in the therapy sessions that he
So do
goes to,
I.
and that he finds a therapist that he can connect with.
Thankfully, he
Um,
has found a wonderful therapist, and she is
oh, awesome.
like everything that he needs. It's like going in and talking to one of his friends, his best friend, and that's what it's
Wow.
about. Finding the right counselor is to have that bond that you can feel
Yeah.
like you're literally talking to a friend, so then you feel
Yeah.
more at ease to open up and talk about the things and not be afraid
Yeah.
of judgment. And that's one thing
If
I don't ever want my children to feel judged. And that's one thing they don't. They've always said that to me. I am the most non-judgmental person you'll ever meet, probably.
That's awesome. It's got to go a long way. I'm a big fan of being non-judgmental.
Yeah, I mean,
um,
to me, I feel like it's ignorance in a way, being judgmental, because we all have our stuff, right? Like, nobody's perfect.
yeah.
So how
Yeah.
can you
Exactly.
judge someone else when you probably have just as many things wrong on your side, So
Yeah. I got my own stuff to deal with, and
exactly.
definitely don't. Yeah. Okay. So what, like, if so here we are. Let's imagine that on the other side of the camera we have 500
Hmm.
moms watching
Yes.
this in real time with
Right.
us, and we're talking to these moms and these
Yeah.
dads. What is, like, if what's like one thing, because I'm sure there's like a bunch of things,
Hmm.
but like, what's a thing that you could share, if you have anything, of like, as like a lesson, or like a, something for other parents to think about, or to focus on, or to look for, like, what does anything come to mind in that regard?
um, if I could say what to look for, I would just, pay attention to the behavioral patterns. Is your child someone that is always around and all of a sudden always in their room? They don't want to be bothered. Maybe their grades start slipping or changing. Just there's sometimes little hints, but then obviously there's sometimes that are they're bigger. Um, I would just say don't be naive. Don't be naive and don't think that this can't happen to you, because it happens every single day, and it happens more than you can imagine. I mean, roadblocks, the child advocacy team was so into, that's another big platform, that these predators, prey on these little children in these chat rooms. So I would
Yeah.
just say don't be naive, be very vigilant, open communication with your kids. Don't ever turn your kids away if they want to talk, because that could be a life-saving moment. It could be, not maybe not helping your child, maybe helping someone else that they're afraid to go to their parent. You should always be a safe space for your children or other children to come to, because you don't know what others are going through at home. Um, so right off the top of my head, those would be my biggest points. And set boundaries. Don't let your children run you and tell you what they're going to do. You are the parent, you set those boundaries, you set the expectations up, and you follow through with it. Don't idle threat. Don't sit back, because that's when things happen. It's when you
Yeah.
become too lax. I'm sure I was too lax, and this is what happened. You know,
Yeah.
um, so I think there's probably a lot of different viewpoints that I could give. Um, but I would say don't be afraid to ask for help. either with your place of employment, if you are struggling, there's EAP programs, there's tons of different resources. There's so many programs statewide, nationwide that they offer. Or if they see this video, contact me, I am always listening ears, there's a lot of resources out there. Don't be afraid.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good message. Yeah, I think the boundaries thing is interesting because like your daughter has demonstrated that from what you described. And I feel like that's something that is sticking in my mind as something that maybe that I can work on as better as a parent, and maybe a general thing for everybody listening and watching is like, what boundaries have we established? What boundaries have we helped our children establish as to, okay, if you're interacting with people and even if you think that you know them, right? Because a lot of that's the thing, right? So kids are like, oh no, I know this person. They're my friend, right? I think I trust them. That you can still have boundaries and you can still exercise boundaries. So that if somebody comes and says, hey, here's a picture of me, why don't you send a picture back?
Right.
That can immediately be like, oh, wait a minute. Nope, that's the thing. Hold on a second. Let me check on that.
And it's ironic that you say that, because I actually, and if I had a Bible, I'd put my hand on it because it's the truth. We just had this conversation last week. I said to her, so if Mark came, my best friend came to pick you up from school, would you go? And she's like, well, no, because you didn't tell me. And I said, you're right. If I don't say anything or your dad doesn't say anything, you're not leaving anywhere with anybody, and that's your first point of contact. We are your trusted source. Yes, you know them. Yes, you know that we know them, but sometimes you don't know who you think you know. I mean, that's proven every day with people, like being serial killers and they're your neighbor, it's like, hey, so again, you can never put too many things in place,
protective measures kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's nice about the scenarios, because that's something I think about too, is like playing out scenarios and saying, okay, this happens or this happens. And I put some of those up on my website for people. If you go to familyitguy.com and you type sextortion in the search box, in the article on sextortion are some conversation starters on, okay, child of this maturity level or this maturity level. Let's run through some scenarios. Somebody comes and they tell you this. What do you think about that?
So
what are you skeptical of? What are you not skeptical of?
It's so important because when you are the example and you practice what you're preaching to your children and you show them that what you say goes, and you just build that foundation of trust with them, they're always gonna have that in the back of their minds to a certain point. But also as a parent, I feel like, we were all there once, so we have to kind of understand their brains and we have to understand the parent brains. And we have to kind of I tell my children, I literally live every day on a whim because I can only plan for so much. I can only prepare so much, but every day is different. And every day I'm just making decisions based on what I know and what I think is the right thing. So follow your gut. If it doesn't feel right, whatever the situation is, it can be with anything, your job, a friend, a coworker, anything. If it doesn't feel right, it's not. And I vibe real easily on energy, and they do too. So they can feel when things aren't right, and I'm glad because of that, but I feel like I've been able to instill a little bit more street smarts into them. They have that common sense as well as sense. It's not just one or the other. Sometimes people, it's one or the other. I feel like they're pretty well rounded, thankfully, so I just say make smart choices because, again, I can only help you so much. You can make the wrong
Yeah.
choice and walk out that door, and I can't do anything about it. So I can
Yeah.
lecture you and do all the things that I can before you walk out the door, but you're the one making that choice and decision, not me.
Yeah.
So if you want those
Yeah.
if you
No,
want
that's
those
great.
negative consequences, natural consequences, right? Here's another one of my mantras. Natural consequences. You want to text and drive, you're going to get in a car accident, you're going to get pulled over, whatever. You study, you pay attention, you ask questions, whatever the case is, you're going to excel, you're going to get good grades, you're going to do all the things. It's natural. If you're speeding, you're either going to get pulled over or you're going to get in an accident most of the time. Like there's only so many things. So your natural consequence is to make a smart choice, because if you don't, you know what's on the other side.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you have demonstrated, from the sounds of it to your family, that you can take, when things do happen, that you can take those things and you can adapt and you can learn from them, and you can have positive outcomes from even like the worst of
100%.
scenarios. And so I think that's amazing. And yeah, thank you very much for sharing your family's story and your story with everybody.
Like I said, it's the world we're in. It's the times that we're in. It's all of it, so what you want, you will do. If you want to protect your kids and you want to make sure, you will, and you do. If you don't really care, you're not going to make as much effort, right? So it's a natural thing. It's like my sister. I try to explain these things to her, and it's like talking to deaf ears, because it's in one and out the other and nothing ever changes. So her result is always the same thing. So until she changes it, here we are, same results. So, like I said, I'm so glad that I came across your platform. I'm so glad you reached back out to me as quickly as you did. That was wonderful. I didn't think I'd ever hear from you, honestly. And I'm really glad that I was able to share this and share my story and my perspective on things that, it's everywhere. And it's sad that people don't realize that there's other people that go through these same things, and it's okay. It doesn't make you any different. It doesn't make you not a good person, I mean, listen, I didn't have anybody to go to, so I would love to be able to help somebody out. If I could help
That's amazing.
out,
Well, I think that good. So far, the summary that I have is, it's not the kid's fault. It's not the parents' fault. It's certainly the fault of the fact that, and granted, like that being said, fault and blame are not always very constructive, but like, I guess what I want to highlight is that the primary thing is not the kid's fault. Right. And that there's always opportunity along the way for each of us to practice communication and to practice boundary setting and to like teach how to set boundaries so that our kids can be prepared for things that they might encounter. And that this is very common. So I've seen reports that there are up to 10,000 sextortion cases a month on Snapchat alone. It wouldn't surprise me. I've seen reports that the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children gets anywhere between 500 to 800 reports a week on sextortion. It is the fastest growing crime that affects young people in the country, in the U.S. That's what the FBI says. And that this is something that is common and that can find the best kids, the best families, good
Yes.
grades, plays sports, does all the right
Mm-hmm.
things, can really get caught up in a bad spot. So your story helps to reinforce
Yeah.
that.
And
This isn't a thing that just happens to certain
no,
types of
it is
people or
not.
certain types of family. This is targeted at young people, oddly enough, mostly
Mm-hmm.
boys, especially in the teenage
Yes.
years. And we need to help our kids be prepared for inbound
Yes.
threats and being able to assess those threats and identify them when they occur.
100%. And that word preparation, huge. Preparing your
Yeah.
children is more than you can, I mean, it's priceless. Giving your children that knowledge, they may never have to use it. Hopefully they don't, but God forbid they ever do.
Yeah.
At least they're prepared, like that they know at least to go to get help somewhere, a starting point. There has to be a
Yeah.
starting point
Yeah.
of the trust, line.
Yeah.
But yes,
Yeah.
being prepared. My son is a statistic. He is on the list of the National Sex Exploitation.
Oh, the National Center
Yes,
for Missing and
thank
Exploited
you.
Children,
Yes, yes, it's a
NCMEC.
little bit of a tongue twister. So
It
yes,
is.
he is on that. He's
Wow.
protected under Megan's law. Um, he
Mm.
he does fall into another statistic that it is most boys. And a lot of times they become predators themselves based on these things. So there's so
Yeah.
many, like I
Right.
said,
Yeah.
there's so many layers to the onion. Um, but it's okay. It's nothing to feel ashamed about. It's nothing to
Yeah.
feel, like you said, it doesn't care race, it doesn't cut age, gender, it doesn't care. It's gonna
Yeah. It doesn't.
happen. It's gonna happen, you know?
Yeah.
So, like I said, I'm so glad you gave me this opportunity. And if you have any other opportunities, I would love to come back on and talk to you again. And, you know, I would totally be excited to help somebody.
Excellent. I love
So,
that. I really appreciate that. Well,
all right.
thank you very
All
much,
right,
Laura.
Ben, thank you. I hope you have a great evening, and I look forward to hearing back from you soon.